Hello friends, welcome to The Buzz. On this episode, we're going to check on the latest bald eagle activity with one of our nest monitors. And then we'll visit Isle of Cache to be transported back into the 1700s, where we'll experience how the Potawatomi and the French voyageurs weave their worlds together with the fur trade. Get ready to explore Illinois country on this episode of The Buzz. Usually we think of birds nesting come springtime, but birds of prey like owls, hawks, and eagles like to get a head start in the winter. One crowd favorite to keep tabs on is the bald eagle, and this could be because they're an endangered species success story, with populations increasing from 400 breeding pairs in the 1960s to now an estimated 71,000 breeding pairs in the lower 48 states. With each new generation of eagles flourishing in our habitats, this proves that our conservation efforts are working. One way we keep track of bald eagles is with nest monitoring. Now, we never disclose the nest locations because the birds and the nest are still federally protected. District staff and monitors keep a distance when observing these nests. The National Audubon Society recommends a distance of 330 feet, which is roughly the length of a football field. Joining us today to share his personal stories and experiences while eagle nest monitoring is Joel Craig, a longtime district volunteer. Thank you, Joel, for joining me today. Let's start off by how long have you been monitoring?
Back in about 2016, we noticed that we had a bonding pair at the preserve where I generally work at most of the time. And so we started keeping an eye on them, and within a year, they were building their own nest. So that would have been 2017 when we started keeping a really close eye on this pair.
And what got you interested? Was it just finding the pair, or were you on the hunt?
Well, eagles are ultimately very cool. But it was something new. I'd grown up by this preserve. I'd been around it my whole life, so seeing eagles there was really exciting for me. So I wanted to be a part of it.
And why do you monitor? Is there kind of like collecting data? Is there a purpose involved?
There is. Eagle nests are protected, so DNR has an interest in them. Fish and Wildlife has an interest in them. So we do GPS locate those nests and share that information with those groups. And it's also part of our conservation success story. It shows that what we're doing in the preserves is working. We have a healthy ecosystem to support these eagles.
How often do you check the nests?
At this time of year, we try to keep a really close eye on them because we are getting close to nesting time. So I try to get out at least once a week, but we have a network of other volunteers and people who are interested in these nests that do tend to feed us information.
Are they building the nest now, or do they reuse the nest?
So they do reuse the nest. So at this time of year, we're going to be watching for the female to be sitting on the nest at any point over the next couple of weeks. Mating would have taken place during the middle of January, so we are into the period when we really need to start watching for that female to be sitting on the nest.
And so that's the behavior you're kind of cluing in that there's eggs?
Exactly, right. Once she's on the nest, we know that there's an egg there.
Is it only the female that sits on the nest, or do they take turns?
They do take turns, but primarily it is the female. She will do the majority of the incubation and brooding of the chicks, whereas the male will do the majority of the hunting. But they do take turns occasionally so that the female can leave the nest to defecate, to hunt, to stretch, to fly around, and then she will come back and replace the male on the nest.
And how big are these nests? I've heard they can be the size of like a queen size mattress.
They can be. Generally they're kind of in the 4 to 6 foot range as far as width, and then about 3 feet deep. But because they reuse them every year, they don't have maid service, so they don't get cleaned out, so that they will continue to build up, and as they get higher and wider, they do increase in size.
Now, sometimes it's hard to like measure exactly how far or how close I am. So are there any signs that kind of tell us like, ooh, you're a little too close?
If they notice your presence, you're generally too close. They are very perceptive of threats, and they view humans as a threat. So if you see them looking at you, they can see you, and you're probably too close.
When can we expect seeing the little eaglets? And can you see them right away as hatching, or does it take some time for them to grow?
It does take some time. So once we do see the female sitting on that nest, we know that there's probably at least one egg. Generally they lay 2, sometimes 3. But once they're on the nest, we start the countdown for about 35 days, and we know that's when that first egg is probably going to be hatching.
And after they hatch and they're eaglets, how long are they still in the nest?
So they stay in the nest for about 12 weeks. When they first hatch, they're only about 4 inches tall. So you're not going to see them right away. It may take a couple weeks before you start seeing their heads popping up against the nest.
Being only 4 inches, that's pretty small. How do you know that they've been hatched? Do the behaviors change in the nest?
The behavior changes a little bit because you're going to see the male bringing a lot of food into the nest at that point. Baby eagles eat a lot, so they have to bring in a huge supply of fish to maintain the diet for those baby eagles, and the female as well, because she's not going to leave the nest when they're young like that.
And what are they eating? Mostly fish? Do they eat dead things?
Primarily fish. It's about 85% of their diet.
When do you stop monitoring the nest, where the eagles are big enough and they're no longer using that location?
So at about 9 weeks, the eagles are fully grown. So we're going to see them doing a behavior called branching. They're going to leave the nest, but they'll be in the area around the nest. They'll be up on the branches. They'll be flapping their wings. They'll be gaining flight muscles. And then by about 12 weeks is when we generally see them leave the nest. They will stay relatively close to the nest. The parents will continue to feed those eaglets.
Have you seen them teaching them how to hunt? I imagine it's awkward.
It is, and what happens is they will try to steal food from the adult. So the adult will catch a fish, for instance, and the immature eagles will try and get that from them, and that's actually part of their education to learn to take care of themselves, to hunt, to gather food. It's part of that growing process.
Is there ever a time where the nest just isn't successful? What do the eagles do then?
First year that they built a nest, it was not in an optimal location. It was really close to some houses. And they did lay eggs. We believe they hatched, but we think that there might have been some human interference, so that nest did fail that year. The following year, they built it in a totally different location in the same preserve, and it's thrived since they moved.
Well, that's great news.
Yeah, exactly.
Do they ever reset and just lay more eggs if the first round doesn't work out?
So we had that happen last year. It's unusual, but it's not unprecedented. And this goes back to why we monitor nests. I had done a hike at this location during the first week of April, and we did see one baby eagle popping its head above the nest. And we also had another nest that we were monitoring that had babies right about the same time. So we were kind of expecting the growth progression to happen simultaneously. And this nest, as we were watching it, we didn't see anything. So we started to worry about what was going on. A couple weeks later, all of a sudden the female was back on the nest. So we kind of had an inkling of what happened, but that wasn't confirmed until about 6 weeks later when we saw baby eagles sticking their heads above the nest. And just as a data point on that, I did go back and explore the weather history for that time, and we did see that there were 2 really severe storms that happened right around the time that we believe that that nest failed.
Being in your own backyard, it's got to feel like a nice, warm and cuddly, feeling that this habitat's healty enough.
It is, because
them.
Again, I grew up right next to this preserve, so it's been a part of my life for 60 plus years. So yeah, to see that happen has been really exciting.
Are there any nests that have been really successful and we have many generations of data?
So this primary nest that I've been talking about in 4 successful nesting seasons has produced 8 offspring. And one year they produced 3, which was very unusual. And then the following year, they only produced 1. So again, it's an average of 2 a year, but sometimes we see those little fluctuations. But to get 3 out of that nest was really unusual.
What happens with, you said 8 young, so where do those 8 over the years go? They don't head back to their same nest where they were raised, do they?
No, but one thing that we've learned from some of our immature eagles that have been fitted with trackers is that they do tend to return to the area where they were born in the wintertime. And then once the new nesting season starts, their territory will expand. So they will fly off to their summer grounds and hunting and whatnot. And then when they get into that 4th year, that's the time when they start looking for a mate, establishing a territory. That territory will generally be within about a 250-mile radius of where they were born.
Bald eagles are an endangered species success story. Have you seen the change right before your eyes from growing up around this area to now?
Oh, totally. 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have any here. It was a rarity to see them. You had to go to Starved Rock in the wintertime if you wanted to see them, or you had to travel to Iowa to Lock and Dam to see the eagles. And now you can come right here and see dozens of them in the wintertime. So that's been a big change as well.
Now that the nests are built, we are awaiting eggs, then eaglets. Stay tuned for more updates around April for fluffy bird alerts. All this data gets shared with our wildlife ecologist, who then also shares it to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Monitoring eagle nests is a fun way to bird, but it also helps to keep our data up to date to see how these populations are doing. So make sure to keep an eye out in the preserves and your neighborhoods. You never know when a new neighbor may move in.
The benefits are great when you invest in nature by donating to the Nature Foundation of Will County. You can help protect our precious habitats and restore natural areas back to their native state. Provide educational opportunities to unlock the natural world for present and future generations. Support diversity and inclusion so everyone can experience the magnificence of nature. The Nature Foundation works hand in hand with the Forest Preserve District of Will County to strengthen the commitment to land stewardship, nature education, wellness, cooperation, and sustainability. Donations large and small make a lasting and significant positive impact on the environment. Invest in nature and join our growing community. Support the cause at willcountynature.org.
At Al-Lakash, it is easy to be transported to another time. Instead of bustling highways, picture expansive prairies. And instead of internet with GPS, you had to learn how to read the land. And no easy one-click shopping, instead you had to work with a community. Welcome to the 1700s, where Will County was known as Illinois country. Visiting this preserve, you'll see a longhouse, trader's cabin, and of course the Al-Lakash Museum. Interpretive naturalist Sarah Russell is here to share these unique places, the artifacts, and this cultural story. Sarah, can you start us off by telling us who would live here in the 1700s?
Sure. This area was kind of home to lots of different groups at that time. Lots of different groups moving around. But the people that we tend to talk about the most were the Potawatomi people. They came in from kind of Michigan, up in Wisconsin, and coming down into this space.
And I assume living by the water was hugely important.
It's incredible. This gives you everything that you need to live and to survive. So they had their home made. this is a multicultural space. So this is not something that is new to today. So it happened at that time as well. The other big group though that we're talking about, the outsiders that were not from here, were the French. And in fact, the French Canadians oftentimes.
And how important was the trade to the Potawatomi?
Trade was incredibly important. Well, it's basically, they had everything that they needed here. But if they wanted something that was not from here, you had to trade for it. And this is not, again, something that is new with the French. They've been doing this for thousands of years, trading with all the different groups around.
We're standing outside the structure called a longhouse. And what would the Potawatomi use the longhouse for?
So the longhouse was basically their home, right? So Potawatomi, just like us today, had lots of different styles of homes. So this is just one style, and this is kind of more of like, you can think of it as almost an apartment building because you have more than just one family who would live inside here.
So this is a little bit different than the wigwam. Would that be like a single family home versus the apartment style?
Right, that's correct, yeah. So a wigwam is a much smaller space, so we've got a smaller amount of people that can fit in there. And the other thing to keep in mind is a wigwam just means home. But when we think about it, we think about wigwams, we think about the structure, the smaller dome style house.
Are the longhouses permanent structures?
They are pretty permanent structures. So these are the frame is permanent, and then anytime that you need to replace the siding or things start to get a little damaged, break down, you go out and you replace it. So here we have American elm.
Okay.
And then there might be some other types of sidings depending on where you're at.
Sure,
in our
what's
areas.
available.
Yeah, exactly. So they're pretty permanent though. However, you know, sometimes they would be in different houses that were a little less permanent, depending on the time of the year. Longhouses and your permanent wigwams, you're finding that in your summer villages. And those villages could be 100, 500 people.
The moment I walk in here, my senses are engaged. I smell smoke. Am I supposed to be smelling that?
Yes, definitely. In fact, this is exactly what we want. So the whole point of this is you're in a longhouse where people live and spend their days. And that includes having to keep warm and needing to cook occasionally in here. And of course, to have a little bit of light is nice too.
Right.
So in a longhouse like this, you have at least 2 different fires in.
Okay.
And of course, you'd have a smoke hole at the top. Now, we can't just have an open hole
at the top.
And they wouldn't have left it open either. They would have had a flap, you know, that you could cover up when it rains or bad weather. Do smoke it. We do light fires in here every week so that way we can engage visitors when they come. But it's also practical too. That smoke keeps away some vermin and some of the insects and stuff and kind of helps to preserve the longhouse.
Now we're in what we like to call the trader's cabin, and my first impression is that this looks like a store. Is that what it would be used for back then?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So you'd have trading posts and other places all around where different people could come together. So in our area, you might have Potawatomi coming together with the French, who would have had goods that they would have been bringing back from New France or from France that they could use to trade for what they really wanted.
And what's New France?
So New France is Canada. It's kind of
the
base,
sure.
The center along the St. Lawrence River Valley. So Quebec, Montreal, that. But we're actually still part of New France too. So we're what's called Illinois country or Upper Louisiana. And it kind of ebbs and flows depending on the time period and who's doing the map. But we're still part of that colonial kingdom, right? That the King of France claimed for France. So that actually goes all the way from Canada down through the Great Lakes, down the Mississippi River Valley area and Illinois country area, down to Mississippi to Louisiana and New Orleans.
Yeah, following kind of Mississippi River, the waterways that they would travel.
Right, which is incredibly cool because we always think about our country coming from the east and kind of going west. And it was
not up and down.
And if we're looking at European powers coming in, it was all over the place, yeah.
Why did the French come to the Potawatomi?
So what the French were really looking for was resources. So they wanted, the main resource that they wanted, of course, was beaver in this area. So that's why they would meet up with the Potawatomi. They might learn a little bit of the languages that they were, that the Potawatomi had and other Native peoples had. And then they would be trading all the goods that they brought with them for the beaver.
And what was the beaver used for? Why was it so sought after?
Everyone wants beaver for fashion.
Ah.
Especially the hats, right? The chapeaus, they call them, right? Okay. They're these...
Oh, the three-pointed, like the pirate hat.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's many different kinds of hats, but it's all about this felting process. And when we look at this, it doesn't scream beaver automatically.
Right.
But basically what you do is you would shave off the beaver's fur off of the skin, and you mush the fur together. And there's little barbs at the end of that beaver fur, and that kind of clumps together and creates felt. So you have your hat. And the coolest thing about beaver fur is that because they live in water, this is a waterproof.
They're waterproof.
Yeah, kind of a situation. So very fashionable.
You look great.
I know.
So what items would the French bring that the Potawatomi would not have that would make their lives easier?
So yeah, a lot of it is Potawatomi had everything that they needed to survive and to thrive. So it's just about this idea of getting some kind of novel ideas, novel things, and then also some goods that they couldn't get right here that they would have to trade for. So here in Illinois country, you do not have metal. So at least not right here in this area. So if you want anything made out of like iron, steel, copper, so if you want, remember that, that in the cup, right?
Yeah, if you don't want your pot to burn on fire.
Right, if you want to be able to just easily stick your pot in the fire, that would be something that would be like exciting to have. Another thing is blankets made out of other materials. So, you've got wonderfully warm bison fur, but maybe you want something made out of wool.
Right, a little bit more comfy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just different, right?
Yeah, it would be different. Yeah,
and it's the colors are a little different, right? That sort of thing. So if you want blankets made out of wool, then you'd have to trade with the French for that. And they're really great because these are one of the few things that actually have a price tag on them.
Oh, well, that makes things easier.
Yeah. So most of the time you're bartering and you're kind of coming to an agreement, but the blankets, these kind of trade blankets that you're seeing are called point blankets. And they actually do have a point on them, and they have, this is worth 1, 2, 3.5 beavers. So you know automatically right off the bat what you're gonna pay for it. It's kind of neat.
Is there anything else unique that the French would bring into this area?
For sure. When we think about like the French bringing in trade goods, a lot of times we think about things that they brought from Europe or New France, Canada, things like our blankets that we talked about already or our beads. But something that kind of demonstrates just how international this trade was and this time period is tea. So we've got tea, and that comes from China. So the French would get this tea from China. It would come in this massive block. It's a compressed tea, so it's massive stones, would roll over it, and you could drink it. You just take a knife, you chip it off, and then you could brew it up. But this would be something else that might be a little bit more extravagant. Maybe it wouldn't be something you trade every day because, wants versus needs. Sure. But it was kind of a cool piece, something a little different.
That's pretty amazing back in that day that we're still getting things from across the globe, really.
Yeah.
I can't say I see many canoes looking like this. Usually, maybe one solid piece of wood or they're plastic or metal. Can you tell us why this canoe is built so special?
Well, to be fair, this is a replica.
Right.
So it is made out of fiberglass, but it is meant to look like the birch bark canoes. This is this amazing native technology that the French people glommed onto as fast as they could because it was the perfect solution for traveling the river roads here in North America. Now, birch bark is something that we don't find out quite as much in this area, but there's still some a little bit. So this is something we're just kind of getting at the edge of where the range might be.
Yeah.
But it's kind of made out of birch, so the bark from the tree. So you have to go ahead and cut down that tree. You have to kind of shimmy around, get the bark off, and then you're able to get pieces of the bark. Now, you're also you're placing this bark around a frame, and you have to sew it all together.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, exactly. And you're thinking about you're sewing something and then you're going in water with all these little bitty holes.
Holes, yeah.
That's not a great solution. So what they did is they used pitch in order to kind of keep it watertight. So what they used is soot from the fireplace, ashes from the fireplace, bear grease, and they would mix it together with like pine resin.
Okay, so it's all sticky stuff.
Incredibly sticky, and it will keep everything where it's supposed to be. Water out, and exactly as it needs to be. Now the other cool thing is they're sewing it up with roots of spruce trees.
Okay.
And so you pull it apart and you use that in order to tie it all up.
And make like a big rope kind of
Make
a thing.
it, yeah, exactly. So that's also one of the things that kind of your thread that you're thinking of. And it's incredibly tight, and it makes everything stay together.
Stick together.
Just as it should, yeah.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing all your knowledge with us. If we wanted to learn more information, where do we go?
Well, just come right here to Isle Allagash Museum. You can explore the preserve and then come into the museum, and you can use the exhibits that are here in order to learn more about this time period and the people who made this space their home.
Hidden Oaks Nature Center is the district's newest acquisition, and we're excited to be able to help others reconnect with nature in the heart of Bolingbrook. There are plenty of opportunities to learn about the natural world both inside and outside. You're sure to leave smarter than when you arrived. Spend some time with our resident turtles. Let the kids show off their crafty side. Check out all the nooks and crannies. Explore the outdoor nature play area and let those little legs run wild and burn off some energy. This visitor center is for you, supported by your tax dollars, so take advantage of everything it has to offer. Map your next adventure at reconnectwithnature.org.
I hope you enjoyed learning about bald eagles and our trip back in time in the 1700s at Allagash. We learned that the Potawatomi lived off the land and how the French brought in resources for the community. Now, if you want to have your own cultural history experience or try your luck at birding, make sure to map your next adventure at reconnectwithnature.org. I hope to see you on a voyage of your own, but until then, I'll see you next time on The Buzz.